Is it? Check, check. Good morning and welcome to all of you. Thanks for being here. Please go ahead and take your seats. This weekend, as you know, was our missions conference, and it went very well. It was very successful. Very thankful to all the members of the missions committee. It's not projecting anything. It's going. Yeah. The missions committee did a fabulous job in preparing and coordinating and executing the missions conference this past weekend. 3 hours on Friday evening and 3 hours Saturday morning, bringing all of our funded missionaries right into this room via Zoom. And I'm so thankful for the robust participation. And we're going to sort of carry the missions theme into the Lord's Day today and throughout, really, partially by accident, or not by accident, but by God's kind providence, because Pastor Mark is planning to preach a missions-oriented sermon this morning to us. He asked me to present about my experience, Hillary's and my experience on the mission field years ago, and also in between the series that I concluded in the evenings on Ecclesiastes and the next extended series I intend to begin as sort of a bridge series. I did a mini series of sermons from Isaiah 55, which I will conclude tonight. And you'll see, I encourage you to come, you'll see that those concluding verses of Isaiah 55 are strongly missions-oriented, and so it all fits in. So again, thank you for being here. Welcome. Let's open with a word of prayer, and then we'll move on. Father in heaven, we thank you for our Savior Jesus Christ. We thank you that He unites us. Thank you that we have Him in common, and that He has joined us together to one another and in Himself as parts of His body. And we commit this time to you, and we ask you to bless it. Thank you for the opportunity to share with these brothers and sisters your faithfulness and how you worked in the church in Stuttgart and are continuing to do so. And Lord, may this time be an encouragement to all of us as we seek to continue to encourage and support and to pray for the missionaries that we support. And let this all be unto the honor and glory of Christ, who is the head of the church, Christ, who is our King, and who is building His church. And we pray all this in His name. Amen. So I'm basically, again, as if you read the newsletter, what I'm going to talk about this morning is, first of all, some of my experiences and our experiences as missionaries for 7 years in Stuttgart, Germany. And then just offer some thoughts on how you can be praying for our missionaries, because it's very important that you do, and ways you can encourage and support them as well. And after each of those sections, of course, I'll leave some time for questions, but any time along the way, if you've got a question, just raise your hand and ask. I'll be happy to address those as we go. And I will, for the sake of anybody who might be watching via Zoom, or watch the recorded session later, if you ask a question, I'll repeat it so that they can hear what the question was. But let me begin by talking a little bit about our experiences. At the very, very end of 2012, the Lord sent my family and me to Germany. 2012 was a whirlwind year, just so many big events in our lives, including my ordination and then my accession to the chaplaincy, and Hillary retired from the Army, from the Air National Guard. I was sworn in as a chaplain. I graduated from seminary. I was ordained in August and then went off just weeks later to the chaplain school. And not 7 days after I graduated from the chaplain school, we got on a plane and moved to Germany. So it was a crazy year for us, but my first 7 years in ministry were as a missionary, a church planting missionary overseas in Stuttgart, Germany. We got on a plane on the 20th of December, and I've enjoyed telling people over the years that we landed on the 21st of December. We arrived in Germany on the winter solstice, the darkest day of the year, to bring the light of the gospel to Stuttgart, and that was our mission. That's what we went to do. When we went, Our older son, Sam, was 15 years old. Our younger son, Branch, was 12. We arrived in a foreign city where we knew no one. We had had contact with some folks who were eventually going to be part of our core group, and they had been encouraging us and they had been supporting us already in terms of finances to get us there, but we had never actually physically laid eyes on any of these people. We didn't have any acquaintances or knowledge of anyone in Stuttgart. But as I say, we arrived on the 21st, which I believe was a Friday, and that next Sunday we worshiped with these folks that picked us up from the airport. He was an Air Force colonel, and he and his wife dearly wanted to have a Reformed church in Stuttgart. If you're an English speaker, if you're a U.S. military member in Stuttgart or almost any other place serving overseas, you'll probably be able to find an English-speaking church. You'll probably be able to find even a Bible-believing English-speaking church, but you probably won't be able to find a Reformed church. And that was a huge need, and that's what these people desperately wanted and desired, and that's why we went. And so they took us on base, and we attended chapel on December 23rd. They hosted us in their home for 3 weeks while we waited our household goods to arrive to move into our own home. And then the very next Sunday, we held our first services. We didn't waste any time. We already had a core group. You'll see a picture of them in just a minute. But we held our first services on the 30th of December, 2012, with a core group of 16 people, including my family of 4. I would note that in God's kindness, and this actually opened doors for lots of growth, lots of ministry opportunity. One of those core group families was a German family, and they were Reformed in their thinking. They were very faithful in service to the church, and they had lots of connections to other Germans who were believers. And so that kind of got us on the map a little bit. That was very helpful. So December 30th, 2012 was our first service. The final service that Hillary and I attended before returning to America was December 1st, almost exactly 7 years later, December 1st, 2019, and we flew out on the 4th. Flew on a Delta direct flight from Stuttgart into Atlanta, got a rental car, started driving down the freeway towards Beaufort, and Hillary said something to me, and she almost expressed my exact thoughts at the time, because there we are driving down a United States interstate, and she said, it almost feels like the last 7 years didn't even happen. You know, it was almost like the whole thing was a dream in a way. But anyway, that was just sort of our experience. But here's the sum of it. If I had to sum up our ministry experience in Stuttgart, pastoring Covenant Fellowship Church, is this: that God was faithful. That's how I would sum it up if I had to sum it up in one sentence. God was faithful, and He blessed the work. Let me show you some slides. First of all, that was our core group. This was who was in attendance, minus one who was taking the picture. This was everyone who was in attendance in our very first worship service. This is Michael and Carol Bridges. He's an Air Force colonel. They let us stay with them for 3 weeks in their home while we waited for our stuff to arrive. This is the Gilbert family. He's a Navy captain, F-18 pilot. That's Branch and Hillary and me. And then this group of 5 here, that's the Ernst family. They're Germans, and they were a great encouragement to us. They joined the church very early on, not long after Michael and Carol did. So that was our first, that's in the backyard of the Bridges family. Can you see? I don't know if you can see back. Okay. And then our final service was there. Nearly 100 people in attendance. So we jumped from 16 to 100 or so within that 7 years. So as I say, God blessed. He was faithful. Of that initial core group that you saw in the previous slide, besides Hillary and me, there are only 4 people in this slide that were in the previous one. And so that was our last service. As you can see, we took the Lord's Supper. And then my successor, Nick Bullock, stood up on the platform and took that picture for us. When, as I said, our first worship services were held at the home of Michael and Carol. And we met and worshiped in their living room for the first 3 weeks. And then once our things arrived and we were able to move into our own place, we started worshiping in our house. And so that's Branch folding bulletins on the couch Sunday morning before people started to arrive. And you can see we got our living room set up and used a music stand as sort of a podium, a pulpit, because that's all we had. And then God wondrously provided within like 8 weeks. And we hadn't even been on ground, and frankly, hadn't been earnestly, desperately beating on doors and seeking a venue where we could meet. But God blessed us with this place. It was the facility of a Methodist church. It was a very old congregation. Their pastor was something like, I forget how old, and the pastor was the youngest person in the church. It was a dwindling congregation, and they were very pleased to let us meet in their building. And they charged us just a pittance of monthly rent. And so they would meet for their service like at 9. They were gone by 10. We were able to come in and have Sunday school at 10:30 and worship at 11:30, and we did that for several years. The German gentleman who had been a member of the church, one of our original members, he's the one that came across this place and got in contact with the responsible parties, and he just continued to be flabbergasted, really, that they would rent to us, because number one, these Methodists are very theologically liberal. And as Germans, they would have done their homework. They'd have looked into us and studied to try to find out, well, who is this group that wants to rent this facility from us? And they would have discerned that we are not theologically liberal, and yet they're willing to rent to us. Furthermore, they're pacifists. I mean, ideological pacifists. And we were here to minister to U.S. military. And yet they were willing to rent us their place. And they charged us almost nothing for it. And since the only thing they really used it for most of the time was for one worship service on Sunday morning that lasted less than an hour, the building was ours basically the rest of the week. So God was so good to us. And that was essentially our congregation for about the first year. So it's the same bunch that you saw in the picture from the backyard, plus another family that got on site really literally like 3 weeks after we did. And that's this group right here, Sam White and his wife Jessica, and they had 2 sons. And then all the rest you've seen, and then Sam was able to get into the picture this time. So that's my family and our congregation, and that's pretty much what we had for about a year. We had some newcomers, we had some visitors come and go, but that was our church. And that's the inside of that building I showed you the slide of a moment ago. By June of 2014, we had grown some, as you can see. You see some new faces. Another example and a testimony of God's faithfulness is that we knew after our first full year that starting as early as February of that second year, we were going to start losing families. And when your church is made up of 5 families, you can't afford to lose a lot of families. And so I challenged the congregation to pray that for every family that we lost, God would bring 2 or 3 new ones. And guess what God did? For every family we lost, God brought 2 or 3 new ones. And so, again, let's see, I'm counting. 1, 2, 3. Sam's taking the picture, plus the Ernst family, if they're all there. That's 8 people that carried over from the picture you just saw into this one. And yet the church is growing, and God's blessing. This is November 2015, and so again, we got more growth, new faces, some old ones gone, but God continued to prosper us. I got to baptize several of the kids in this picture. I baptized that little girl, and where's Elijah? I baptized him. And then this family back here, the guy here, and then these 2 gigantic guys, those are his youngest 2 of 10 children. All the rest of which were grown and out of the house, many of whom serve in the military, but they were stalwarts. They were there. basically from 2015 on past our time there. I think they ended up leaving Germany about the same time, roughly, that Hillary and I did. But because he was he was a government, an Army civilian employee, not all the same restrictions in terms of length of tour and all that applied. So they were able to stay a good long time with us, and we were very thankful. Then we had to move. So that picture, the previous picture, was probably it was late in our time at that little Methodist chapel, because the Methodist church finally decided they needed to sell that chapel, and they offered us opportunity to make an offer on it, but I thought, there's no way, we can't buy that place. Plus, we were reaching capacity there anyway, and I thought if we're gonna try to muster up the funds to purchase a facility, we should try to go for something with some room for growth. And that place, thanks be to God, didn't have much room for us to grow. So we had to get out, and then God provided a new place. It was a chapel, again, affiliated with a, what would you call the battalion? A nursing home, basically, yeah. And they have a little chapel that was rarely used, and they said you can use it. And again, just like with the Methodist church, they charged us very, very little to use it. This place didn't really officially charge us anything. They just said, can you give us an offering every month or so? And so we did. That's the inside of it. I couldn't find any pictures of the outside, but the outside wasn't really all that impressive anyway. But there you have it, Hillary and me on the front, and then on back, the church growing, God blessing, and as I say, I got to do some baptisms there. That's Elijah Schmore. I think Rob and Lena have at least one more. They had like 5 kids, but I had the privilege of baptizing their youngest. And we're doing, as I talk about what we did while we were there, we're doing all the same things any church would do. We're baptizing, making disciples. This is a group of women with whom Hillary led a Bible study. 5 women in the picture, 4 nations represented. So our congregation was very diverse. We had a lady from Switzerland, a lady from Thailand, 2 from Germany, 1 from, 1 from America. Of those 5, only 1's American. And Hillary would meet with these ladies for Bible study and fellowship. That study grew. I had another picture with a much larger group with like 6 or 7 nations represented in that one Bible study. Another aspect of our ministry was we had the opportunity to invest in and disciple young men who were preparing for ministry. And this young man, Robin Dahmer, was with us for a couple of years. He had just graduated from a Bible school just outside of Stuttgart. He was interested in pastoral ministry. He worshiped with us for a long time, and I was able to invest in him. And he once told me he thinks of me as a second father, and I thought, when a guy who's in his 20s calls you a second father, that means you're getting old. But so I thought more of him as a friend or a brother. He thought me as a father. But anyway. So Robin is now pastoring in Munich. He's pastoring a church of his own, Christ Church, but a congregation of his own there. Another young man, Philip Letts, and I think at the time this photo was taken, this was his fiancée, but Philip and Melly were married. I conducted the wedding, and he is pastoring, or was. I'm not sure if he's actively in pastoral ministry right now, but he studied at the same Bible school that Robin did, and has been serving the Lord in various forms of ministry ever since. There was I almost said young couple. They were an older couple. Army veteran, U.S. government civilian employee now. He and his wife, who was Korean, started attending Covenant Fellowship Church, and they were with us until we left. Very faithful, very stalwart participants in the life of the church. And we are in Germany in God's providence as the 500th anniversary of Luther and his 95 Theses and sort of the dawn of the Reformation came around. So there are all kinds of celebrations going on, 500th anniversary of the Reformation, and most of the locals had no idea what it meant, what it was all about really. A lot of Americans did, and a lot of the evangelical Germans did too. But there were all kinds of conferences and activities springing up all over the place in connection with that big 500th anniversary. And this man, his name was Joel, he comes to me, he says, Steve, we ought to have a Reformation conference. I said, what? He says, yeah, we ought to have one of our own. I said, what do you mean? He says, come on, man, we're the real deal. We need to do this. And so with his help and the help of Hillary and several others, we planned and advertised a Reformation conference. And what you have in this picture is a bunch of Germans from all over the country, really, mostly in the southwest section, but some came from quite a distance to attend our Reformation conference, and there they are, all singing A Mighty Fortress is Our God. And then that little chapel where I showed you a picture or two from, we eventually had to move out of that because it was being demolished. And so there we found ourselves again trying to find a place where we could meet. And God provided this place. That is actually a building owned by the, they call it the Landeskirche. It means the, how would you literally, how do you say Landeskirche in well, for Americans,
It's a government funded.
yeah. And the thing is, they don't like you to call it that in English, but that's basically what it is. In Germany, you've got the Catholic Church and you've got the Evangelical Church, which is Lutheran, and those are your choices basically, and some of your taxes go to one or the other, you choose. This building belongs to the Landeskirche, but like so many of the state churches, their congregations are dwindling. In that big building, which seats probably 300, they have a congregation maybe of 15, and you know, dwindling. And in God's providence, they agreed to rent it to us. Same arrangement, they would meet early and they'd be out, and then we would meet. And so that was a big accomplishment. We started meeting there just 2 months before Hillary and I left. So I was thankful. Again, God was faithful. He provided. Before we left, the church was situated somewhere, and we're still kind of, you know, flailing and floundering and looking for a place.
So is the church still there?
The church is still meeting here, yes. And that's the inside, and that's maybe our first worship service in that building. And I'm told, see, all those years that we were there, 7 years, we didn't really have an accompanist. So we sang all our hymns to recorded accompaniment. But since that time, now they've got 3 or maybe 4 people who are capable and competent keyboardists, including somebody who's able to play that organ there. And so I'm thankful for that and excited about it. So we worshiped there for a few months before the Lord brought us back. And let's see, I can't remember what the next slide is. Okay, I'll go back. Let me just wrap up with a couple of closing remarks about our experience. Issues that we faced while we were there, we had a lot of turnover. You know, we'd welcome people, they'd come and they'd worship with us, we'd get to know them, we'd grow to love them, and they would have to be transferred out. But we knew that was going to be the case. We knew that was part of the deal with this kind of ministry. And we kind of embraced it in a lot of ways. And our former pastor from when I was in seminary helped us to embrace it when he kind of tried to impress upon us the sending aspect of a ministry like that. You know, people come in, you can disciple them for a period of a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they go out. And whatever you poured into them, whatever you invested in them, they take with them and can share it with others. And so I tried to see that. I tried to, you know, when we had to say goodbye to people over and over again, time and time again, I tried to just keep that in mind. We're sending them out, and God has given us the privilege of ministering to them for a time. But that didn't change the fact that it was a test of faith, as you're seeing people go and wondering, well, is God going to fill the ranks? But he always did. He always did. For us, a big thing was residency issues, trying to get and trying to maintain and trying to renew a residence visa so that we could stay. We had a huge problem with that with Branch, because Branch was not born in the U.S. Branch was born in Ukraine. and they needed this special document attached to his birth certificate and all of his other stuff that we didn't have. And they said, well, you must have this document. And I said, we don't have it. And they said, well, you have to get it from Ukraine. And we kept trying and trying, and finally we decided, well, I guess we just have to go there. And then my brother-in-law, who he and my sister and their family lived in Ukraine for 10 years, he heard of that and he got in touch with us and said, do not go to Ukraine. He said, just go to the office, go to the bureau, tell them you're having difficulty getting the document from Ukraine. They will believe you, and then just go from there. And sure enough, that's exactly what we did, and they kind of stamped his thing, and we were good. But it took a while, and it took a lot of wringing of hands and prayer and that kind of thing. And then taxes. We got hit with a lot of taxes, things that we weren't anticipating. But God was good, God provided. It turns out that on this day in 2019, I officially announced to Covenant Fellowship Church that First Scots PCA of Beaufort, South Carolina had issued us a call, and we had accepted. So, we were kind of on that trajectory, on our way out by that time in 2019. So, before I go on, are there any questions?
Steve?
Yeah.
Were they able to understand English, or was there somebody to help with German, or not?
Oh, I didn't even cover that part, did I? All our services were in English because our main mission, we welcomed anyone who came, but our primary reason for being there was to minister to U.S. military. So it was an English-speaking church. I preached and taught in English. That German family that was with us, they were all very fluent in English. I mean, highly fluent. And so there was that. But then that German family also, it so happens, was connected with lots of Germans who were hungering for the word and weren't getting it. And so they would come and visit. And at times, in the evening service especially, they would come, and Karsten, the dad in that family, who has a doctorate in church history from the University of Tübingen, by the way, highly prestigious school, very liberal, but that's one of the great theological institutions in Germany, and he studied there. He'd fill a pulpit for me occasionally when I was away, and could preach fluently in English or German. It's pretty remarkable. Karsten would say, hey, we have some friends from wherever. They don't speak much English. Can we do translation tonight? And what happened with me on those occasions was just a brief moment of, I didn't plan on this, but then I would come to realize, what an opportunity. I've prepared this message. He can deliver it to them in their own language. And so, yes, praise the Lord, we'll definitely do translation. And so I would stand up there, and phrase by phrase, Karsten would translate it into German for me. And then, I think somewhere along the line in 2014, because we were getting more and more people coming in like that whose English wasn't very good, but they wanted to hear the word, he and I just agreed, okay, every Sunday evening we're going to do translation. And so from there on out, that was the practice. That's what we did.
So, Pastor, several of our missionaries yesterday spoke of state-run churches, or the state was involved in the church. We're not used to that here. Can you just briefly explain how that works?
Okay, the question has to do with how do state-run churches work, and there are a lot of countries that have them. And so Heidi could probably tell you more about this or explain this better to me, but basically, you pay a lot of taxes. These are all these European countries are essentially socialist, and so the taxes are very high, and part of your taxes, a very small portion, not a tithe by any stretch, but a small portion of your taxes goes to the Landeskirche. And you can designate, well, I'm Roman Catholic, I want my taxes to go to the Roman Catholic Church, or you can say, no, I'm an evangelical, I want it to go to the evangelical church, and that's where that money goes, and that's how the churches are supported. The problem is, and we learned this in church history courses in seminary, when the church is kind of owned by the state, it just doesn't work because it tends to go liberal as they almost always do. So like the Church of Sweden. Church of Sweden is a Lutheran church essentially, but it's not a believing church because of the state gets involved in that.
And Steve, believing that the government is taking care of the needs of the church, people, if they give 1 mark, which is 25 cents as an offering, they seem to think that's a lot of money to give to the church. So never knew about tithing or.
Right. Heidi, who grew up in Germany, commented on the fact that people, since the government's taking taxes from them for the church, then there's not really any need for them to give any more. And if they do, even if it's just a tiny bit, they feel like they're really doing a lot for the Lord. Jeff?
Listening to you, I'm struck by some of the parallels in the early days for Scots. Not everybody here would be familiar with that, but we had a nomadic existence in the early days, being in the church, in the school cafeteria where we met our worship, and we were paying a minimal rent to the school for that privilege, and it was so there was a lot of parallels.
Yeah, many parallels. And I was thinking about this even as I prepared. Alex and I have this in common, that we both spent the beginnings of our ministry as church planting pastors. And I mentioned our last service, the last service that Hillary and I attended before we departed Germany. There were about 100 in attendance. According to Dylan Halter, who is now pastoring that church, there's almost 100 members at CFC now. And so another common experience that Alex and I both had is that in addition to being church planting pastors, God has wonderfully blessed both of our ministries. You see how First Scots has grown. And if there are no other questions, I'd just like to take a few moments. Yeah, Noah.
So like with the churches like receiving a tax, or is there any point where the governments would be like coming and saying we don't like that you're teaching this? Like, is there any like repercussions for that, or is there still some sense of religious freedom even though you are receiving some like benefit, if you will, from
Yeah, the question has to do with the government's control over the church and what they preach and teach, basically. Yeah, well, essentially the government thinks it has control and can try to regulate what you teach and preach. In fact, it's you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Heidi, but from what I understand from my German friends over there, it is illegal in Germany to try to proselytize a Jew. And part of that has to do with their sort of national, their consciousness of the Holocaust and all that. So it kind of almost in an extreme response to that, it's really to try to lead a Jew to Christ is considered a no-no. But there was a guy, while we were over there, a faithful minister in the Landeskirche, the Lutheran church, the Protestant side of the house, who was really standing up, and I don't remember all the details, but he took a very strong stand and preached very boldly against some, I think maybe it's the LGBTQ, yeah.
It was actually a prayer meeting where they were encouraged to pray with Muslims, and he wouldn't join in prayer with Muslims, and he preached about it. And later on it became also the LGBTQ, but he had hundreds of people coming outside the church to support him, and his congregation was bigger than any in the whole. He was from Bremen, I think.
Yeah. So there was a minister in the Landeskirche who's standing up for the truth, getting some pushback from the authorities, but getting tremendous support from his congregation and from the populace. So that was really encouraging to see him take a stand and be firm in it. Just a few thoughts then on how to pray for our missionaries. obviously, the most important thing probably is to pray for God's blessing on their ministry of the word. That's why they're there. They've gone where they've gone, and they're doing what they're doing in order to take the gospel to people. So pray that God would give the word success. Pray for their encouragement. I'm having surgery tomorrow, as most of you know, so I've been sort of distancing a little bit, and that's why I didn't attend the conference yesterday. But from what I understand, I think Aaron Halbert mentioned the temptation that he faces sometimes to want to be in control as opposed to trusting the Lord. So pray that for your missionaries, that they'd be encouraged and they'd really have faith to believe in the Lord to bless their efforts. A big one is pray for their families. Pray for their families. Pray for the missionaries' wives. I mean, it can be hard to be a pastor's wife. I think it can be even harder to be a missionary's wife. It's the same job, basically, but added elements, added difficulties, added challenges. You're in a foreign country. You're far from your family, extended family. Anything that a pastor's wife would struggle with, or anything that would be a challenge about that role, is amplified on the mission field. So pray for their wives. Pray for their children. Pray for their children. The rigors and the demands and the challenges of missions work oftentimes are things that a person can face with confidence as long as they're trusting in the Lord. But if they're distracted by struggles that their children are having, that can make it really tough. That can really make it difficult to stay focused. And you don't want to neglect your children either. But the kids, just like the everybody else, have to adapt to the culture in which they're living, and that's not always easy. When we plopped our boys down, I have always told people, I said, of all the people who really took it on the chin in order for us to go and be missionaries, it was our sons, because their whole education got disrupted. That we had to put them in German school. Homeschooling is not legal in Germany, so we had to put them in school, and we did, but they didn't speak any German. So like weeks after we arrived, see you guys, off to school. And so they were having to learn German while trying to learn the course content, while trying to make friends, while trying to learn to live in Germany. So that can be tough. Every missionary, I guess, above all, desires for their kids to come to a saving knowledge of Christ. So you want to pray for that. Pray that the Lord would raise up co-laborers for them. We had a lot of support. Everybody in our core group was helpful. They pitched in. They supported us in various ways, including financially. But it's really kind of frontier ministry in a sense, and a lot of it was very much a family operation. I showed you the picture of Branch folding bulletins. Sam used to run sound for us, and he'd play the hymn accompaniment, and Branch would put up the numbers for the hymns. Everybody's pitching in. Hillary was doing nursery. She led a Sunday school class for this wide range of kids. And, she gave so selflessly to that whole work. I could not have done it without her. She led a Sunday school class when it's not really something that she's jazzed about. We all have things that we enjoy doing in ministry, stuff that we really feel led to do. Teaching Sunday school to a group of kids whose ages range from 3 to like 10 wasn't something she was jazzed about, but she did it. She did it because it needed to be done, and she did it cheerfully, and God blessed it. But it's hard. So pray for co-laborers. God would raise up people to do things like that. Somebody maybe who just really feels led to lead Sunday school for kids, or to help out in different ways that you need, whether it's administration, but most particularly pray that God would raise up officers for them. That was a theme that you saw again and again in the missionary presentations. I've seen the notes. A lot of them, some of them have officers, some of them have elders and deacons, some of them don't. We didn't the whole time I was there. That was something that my successor, Nick Bullock, was able to do. He was able do some officer nominations and do the training and you know, ordain and install elders and deacons. And so that was a big step forward for CFC in Stuttgart, and that was something the Lord used Nick to do. We operated with no elders, no deacons. It's not that people weren't eldering and that people weren't deaconing, but we didn't have officers. And then another theme that we heard from our missionaries during the conference is, you know, and this really is common to churches in America a lot of the times too, especially plants, especially smaller struggling churches. You know, you got to have a place to meet, and it's not always easy to find one, even here. But then in a foreign country, the difficulties are increased. Do you have any questions about how to pray for our missionaries? All right, then finally, let me just share some thoughts on how to support them and encourage them. I think number one, communicate with them. Write to them, send them emails, send them cards, get on their mailing lists, because our missions committee sees their periodic mailings, and they're kept up to speed on what's going on with those. But you as individuals can sign up, say, I want to get your newsletter. Now you might not want to get 6 newsletters or 7, and that's okay, I understand. But if you were at the conference and any one of those particular missionaries really gripped you in terms of a passion to support and encourage, then get in touch with that missionary and say, hey, I want to receive your email. I want to receive your newsletters. Stay informed of what's going on with their ministries and what their needs are, because some of the needs are going to be common to every single missions situation, but some are going to be different. And so find out what their needs are, and then ask them how you might support them. Because as I say, each situation is different. I was talking with somebody, or somebody conveyed a conversation they had with somebody who said they like to send care packages, and that's a great idea. Everybody loves getting a care package. But I can say this, at least in the case of Nick Bullock when he was there, even though he certainly appreciated the effort and all the expense and the time that went into putting a care package together, packaging it, the expense of mailing it out and all that. It was difficult for him to get those, because in a lot of cases, things like that, especially if it's coming from out of country, they won't deliver it to your house and put it on your doorstep the way Amazon does. It has to stay at the post office, and then the person has to go and pick it up. And then in many cases, again, if it came from out of country, they have to pay taxes on it. So all of your love and sincerity in sending a care package could end up being an inconvenience and an expense. So ask the missionary. That's one of the best blessings and benefits of getting in touch, because then you can know, hey, would this be a good idea? Would this be a blessing to you or not?
That's about packages. What about cards and letters? Do they go through?
Cards and letters are fine.
They'll get there.
Yeah. The German mail is amazingly efficient. In a lot of cases, you can drop a letter in the German mail and it can go anywhere in the country and it'll be there the next day. They're amazing. You can misaddress a card and they'll figure out who it is and find them and get that letter to them. Do it. Yes, go ahead.
Taxes again, and you said that taxes were something you weren't planning for. Do you mean on the church itself, or do you personally as a family?
On us. We spent our first 3 years blissfully ignorant of the fact that we were supposed to be paying German income tax. And then someone came along and said, have you been filing income tax in Germany? We said, no. And then we got hit with 3 years of back taxes. Real quick, you can ask them if they have additional financial support needs. Some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them are, they're fully supported, and that's not a current need, but a lot of them might need some additional financial support. And maybe you can help with that. Let me, in behalf of the session and our deacons, let me encourage you that if you want to give individually to missionaries, we strongly encourage that, but we also would plead with you to make that above the tithe, not as a substitute for it. because our church is supporting these missionaries, all 6 of them, and pretty generously. And so your tithes and offerings are going to those missionaries already. It'd be a great thing if you wanted to support them additionally, but if you're going to do that, let that be above the tithe, please. And as Dawn asked, cards and letters, I think in most cases are fine. They will get to them. And then another thing, and I think, again, I wasn't there, but one thing Hillary shared with me, that when someone asked, how can we encourage you, how can we best support you, I think in every case the answer was come and visit. So I encourage you to do it. And let me make a caveat about that. Going and visiting a missionary doesn't mean you have to do a short-term missions trip. In fact, a lot of times that too, kind of like the packages in some cases, is more work for the missionary than the benefit they may derive from a short-term missions team coming over. Not always the case. And if they ask for it, if one of these missionaries says, hey, can First Scots send a group over for about a week next summer to do this, this, and this, we can say, yeah, we'd love to do that. But if we contact a missionary and say, hey, we're going to come over and do a short-term mission trip with you, and then they've got to think about, okay, how are we going to use these people? Where are we going to put them? I think they would love for you to just maybe take a vacation in southern Italy, and then while you're there, come and visit them and worship them. Go visit Taiwan, go visit wherever our missionaries are, drop in on them, let them see you face to face, support them, encourage them by just being there in the pew. That's a huge encouragement. You have no idea how big an encouragement that is. Any questions then about encouraging and supporting our missionaries? Any questions in general?
Does First Scots have a particular percentage that they give to missionaries from their income?
I can answer. We develop a budget for missions and outreach annually based off of the general giving from the previous year. Some of that, the budget is broken down into several different categories, but funding for international missionaries takes up the overwhelming majority of the budget. We also have certain local groups, certain other projects like the Operation Christmas Child through Samaritan's Purse, and then we also do give a portion of our budget to our presbytery, and then a presbytery has missionary projects that they support, and we contribute to those as well.
So how do we decide which missionaries we support?
That has developed over the years, since even before my time here. We've been supporting the Halberts for a long time, right? And then, for instance, I can tell you how we came to support CFC in Stuttgart, and that was after Hillary and I got here, we asked the missions committee, could you please support this church? We've invested a lot there, and we'd love, if you've got some extra missionary funding, we would dearly love for First Scots to support CFC, and they voted to go ahead and do that. It was approved by the session, and so that's how that's come about. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, there's a missions policy manual that gives kind of paradigms for what we can and can't support. Because we get, I would guess I get 5 emails a week from different organizations. And some of them, like, you have to have some level of standard, in part because you guys are the ones giving through it, and so we would want your money to be going to things that you would desire and feel would be consistent with our mission. So there's a paradigm written there of organizations that we can and can't support, and then also a tiered structure of what we value in what we support. Church planting is always going to be the highest level of support. If you notice it with our missions conference, every missionary, foreign missionary that we're supporting is not there just to kind of do itinerant evangelism. The goal is to plant churches that will outlast them. So all those things are written out in the policy manual.
Steve, you might have said it. Is CFC a particularized PCA church, or are they considered a plant still?
They're still considered a plant in a mission work. That's a great question with a very complicated answer. But I'll be happy to talk with you about that. Was there anything else before we close, Catherine?
For the 6 that we support now, is it equally split?
It's nearly equal. Some a little bit more than others, but
So,
How is that?
I'm happy to answer that one too. We, as a committee, and then with the session's approval and their support, it's been our sort of philosophy is that we would like to support a smaller pool of churches significantly rather than a ton of churches very little. And so as we have over the years, thankfully, due to faithful giving from our congregation, our missions and outreach budget has gone up every year. And so what we have desired to do over time is increase how much we give to each international missionary, each church plant or each church out there. And then when our budget grows, we discuss whether, how we want those extra funds to be distributed. And sometimes that is to increase the giving that we're already doing to these specific people. Sometimes it is to add. So I can speak specifically about the Quos in Taiwan. They approached us through, I believe it was Woodruff Road in Greenville area. They are also a supporting church. They shared their information with us. We learned more about them. We were very excited about their ministry. However, our missions and outreach budget was already committed for the whole year. And so we kept them in mind. We followed up with them. We had regular communication with Mark and his team. And then when we had our budget rolled out for the following year, we knew that with at least some of that money, we wanted to dedicate it to that project and that group. So the budget is not confidential or private. I don't think Mark can answer that definitively. And if anybody has questions about what is the budget and where does it go, we can discuss that. We want y'all to be informed and be a part of this process. And I'll also kind of plug the Missions and Outreach Committee is always looking for more help. It does meet monthly and helps navigate all of these things. And so if you think you want to get involved, it's not private or exclusive. If you're a member of the church and you want to serve in this way, we would love to get you involved. So come and talk to us. Me, Hillary, Susie, or Ron would be the best people for right now.
I was looking for the dollar amount. Is the dollar amount equally given to each of the missionaries?
No, it's not.
And who determines that?
The Missions and Outreach Committee develops a budget. It's submitted to the session for their approval, and then that's how it's decided.
we're over time, so if you got any other questions for me, or certainly for David, or Ron, or Mark, please approach them. They're happy to talk with you. Thank you to the Missions Committee, and congratulations on a well-executed and wonderful missions conference. And thank you all for your support of our missionaries. So let's close in prayer and get ready to worship our Lord. Father in heaven, we thank you for our Savior Jesus Christ, and we thank you that He is building His church here and throughout the world. And thank you that we have the privilege of supporting and encouraging and praying for missionaries. We ask you to bless them and their labors even this day, and bless us in ours too, as we're getting ready to assemble in holy convocation to give praise to your glorious name. Help us in that, we pray, and we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks.
I helped out before, so. So Dudley and I had a sleepover. He made me sleep upstairs, although I reminded him that he hasn't weaned